but I do want to say I wish, I really wish that this program had more recognition, and I wish it was more mainstream, because I truly believe if this program was as big as, the nicotine patches and all that, like people would be quitting left and right, and it would be like, oh, you're trying to quit here, just do the CBQ method, why are you wasting your time? Like, it really does work. I was very satisfied with the results and just the whole approach behind it, and like I said, the scientific aspect, it made so much sense. It was so foolproof. You're not born addicted to nicotine, you developed that addiction, your brain was rewired. So to reverse that rewiring and bring it back to its normal self, I really think it's so good what you're doing, and I really appreciate everything that you've done, and I'm so grateful that I found your program.
Hi everyone, this is Nasya Davos and welcome to this episode of Ask an Ex. Every Ask an Ex episode features an inspiring ex-smoker or ex-vapor who succeeded with the CBQ method and who shares their personal experience and unique perspective on quitting the nicotine addiction. The ex I have with me today joined our CBQ program, quit vaping on the 24th of February 2020, and he is here to tell you how he did it. Please welcome Trent Westerson. Trent, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, and congratulations on quitting vaping more than 2 years ago. This is huge.
Yeah.
So how did you, okay, I have a lot of questions. Tell me, how did you start vaping? Did you start vaping directly or did you go from smoking to vaping?
I started directly, vaping really took off in 2014, I would say. And a lot of people my age at the time, I was graduating high school, and everyone was kind of just picking up vaping. It's like this new thing. Oh, look, flavored nicotine, it's not as bad as smoking. It was what everyone would say. And I got addicted to vaping pretty quickly. And I went to college and I started vaping, and I never thought I would be like somebody that was addicted to nicotine or a smoker. I never pictured myself as that. So when I got addicted, I really wanted to quit, and I told myself I would quit. So that's kind of how it started, though, was just, being young, and the vaping came out and it just was such a craze. So
yeah, and I think that's a great point, because many younger people that are around your age just start with vaping because it's trendy and cool. So
exactly.
Yeah, so that's very interesting. So what made you decide to quit? Because normally someone would quit later or have not feel like quitting when we're in our 20s. So what caused you to decide to take it seriously?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I never imagined myself to be a smoker. My brother smokes. My mom, she's been good lately, but she was a smoker, and I just always told myself I would never be a smoker, and then I was made it a goal to quit. I told myself after college I would quit. So I graduated in fall of 2019, and I was doing, thank you, and I was doing some research on how to quit. And a lot of the things you see when you do the research, you'll get like ads for nicotine gum or that kind of stuff. And I just stumbled across your program, and I went to the webinar that you had, and everything that you said made a lot of sense to me. It was very scientific, the approach, and I'm a scientist myself, so I really liked that. So it was just like
amazing.
Everything made sense. Like the reverse, like reprogramming your brain to not be addicted, and how nicotine gum and vape and all that stuff is created by big tobacco, and they don't actually want you to quit. So I just really like the things you said, and I decided to give it a shot.
And that was your first attempt, and you were successful.
Correct.
That's amazing. That's a really, really cool story. And what's really impressive is that usually someone who has not tried to quit smoking before wouldn't invest in an online program and a course where they have to do the work and change their thinking and reprogram their minds, someone would be more likely to go for those nicotine substitutes and those magic pills that don't work long term. So it made sense to you and you thought, this is it, I'm gonna go for it, I'm gonna try it.
Yeah.
And how was it going through the program?
So going through the program, it was relatively simple. Like you say in the program many times, like all you have to do is just complete it like completely, like don't try to cut any corners. And at times I was maybe tempted to cut corners or didn't necessarily want to do the exercises, but I did, and I did them all throughout. And it towards the end, like maybe like day 7, it's 10-day program, right?
Yeah, you could smoke
I remember.
or vaping on the day 10. Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, so I think like around like 7 or 8, I was like, oh, I'm really gonna do this. Like I can see the program working and it's really starting to turn around. And I remember my last, because you're supposed to do like one last cigarette or right at the end. Yeah. I was like in the backyard with my roommate and I was like, I have to do one last hit and then I'm done. So like he was like there and documented it and stuff. It was funny, but.
Oh, okay. And that was it.
Yeah, and that was my last hit.
And how did do your friends vape?
I would say like half of them vape, yeah. Okay,
and how was it socializing after you stopped?
It was easy. I didn't have a problem with it. I was actually while I was in the program, I think I was in the program at this time, maybe day 5 or 6. I was hanging out with a friend that was vaping and he was offering me a hit and he was like, you're not vaping right now, what's going on? And I was like, oh yeah, I quit. And like I wasn't fully quitting yet, like I actually still was able to smoke because you're supposed to smoke throughout the program slightly, then you kind of cut it down as you go. So I actually was technically still vaping at the time, but I decided to not smoke around him and just like tell him, no, I quit, I'm done. And it wasn't even by like day 6, I still had urges and I still got urges afterwards. But with the exercises that you learn in the program and the way you start to think afterwards, it's really easy to just squash those urges and they go away in like a minute, right? So the program really helped with all that. And I haven't desired nicotine and I can't even remember the last time actually.
That's amazing, and thank you for sharing that. And tell me more about the urges. So it's great that you were able to squash them in less than a minute, because urges are gonna come. I think that's very normal. It's how you handle them and respond to those cravings that matters. So what helped you overcome those cravings so quickly? What is something that maybe you went back to and used a lot that was really your go-to coping tool when you had those cravings?
Well, I remember you guys gave advice. You guys gave like a list of like, oh, if you want something, try any of these, and it was like 30 or so exercises. One of them, the ones I chose were I would do chess, online chess, and I would do breathing exercises. And the breathing exercises helped me actually because it's a mental addiction that you're facing with the urges. So you have this is it the mental addiction? Is that right? When you get like so
you remember everything perfectly. Yeah. It's been more than 2 years. That's exactly it.
Yeah, so I would get the mental addictions, and what I would do is when I would do the breathing exercises, it would kind of take my mind off of the addiction, and I would put my mind into the like focusing my breathing and controlling it and do it. I think I would do 5 seconds in, hold for 6, and then 7 seconds out. And just doing that would really, it's almost like meditating in a way. So that was how I personally would fight my urges. And then again, like I said, the chest would help too. If I was at the house just sitting on the couch and I got an urge, I would just maybe play some chess for 10 minutes and forget about it.
Yeah, because your mind was totally focused on, totally occupied with the chess. Okay, and these 2 strategies, they helped you even through strong cravings?
Yes.
Great. And another thing I wanted to ask you, with vaping, it has a very strong mouth habit
Hmm.
component, because when you vape, you just vape all the time. It's not, oh,
Yeah.
I'm gonna smoke a cigarette now. It's you have it in your hand most of the time. So how was it, this transition to breaking this automaticity,
Hmm.
and how did you do it? Can you tell me more about this part?
Yeah, that was definitely difficult because, like you said, the vaping was such a reactive thing. It was like you're constantly, hitting it and putting it down. It's not just like, oh, I'm gonna smoke a cigarette and then not do it for an hour. Vaping,
Yeah.
it's sitting next to you all the time, so you just want to hit it all the time. So that was definitely difficult. I actually don't remember. I think just the exercises that I did helped me through that one, but I do remember that being difficult for like the aspect of vaping.
Okay. I mean, if it doesn't stand out so much, I guess that's a good thing in a way. It didn't bother you much, and you adjusted
Yeah.
afterwards.
Yeah, definitely adjusted afterwards.
You told me that when I emailed you and told you congratulations after quitting, and you said that one of the things that you love about the program is that you learn skills that not only made quitting easy, but you could apply to your life on an everyday basis. Can
Yeah.
you tell me how the program helped you with your everyday life, or how it impacted you outside of vaping?
Hmm. Yeah, I think so. What I meant by that is that the program, it teaches you like it's like a way of thinking in a way. Like as you're reprogramming your brain, you can kind of apply these to other aspects of your life, and it just teaches you to think differently in general, not necessarily like, oh, like it helped with this exact situation. Like just kind of like the way my perspective of the world changed and my perspective on how like my mind operates and that sort of stuff. Like I think the reprogramming, I think kicking the addiction, it's all just beneficial for your life, not just for your health, not just for your physical health, but your mental health as well, and the
Yes.
way you approach life. So that's what I meant by that email. I remember that email actually.
Yeah, and and the reason I point that out, because it's so important, and it's one of the main goals of the program, to not just help someone stop an addiction, but to help you not feel you need an addiction, and to have more trust in your mind, and learn how to use the power of your mind better. So I'm really glad you had mentioned that, and that's why I brought it up again. So that's great. And how did you notice any changes in your health, or your life after quitting vaping?
I think it helped my mental health a good amount.
Good.
Not having this dependency on nicotine was kind of like I just like removed the dark cloud that was in the back of my mind, right? Helped clear my mind, and I noticed that I was more willing to exercise. Like a lot of times I use like, oh, like I want to exercise, but vaping right now, so my lungs aren't, feeling very strong or something. Like I would make excuses for myself, and I exercise quite a bit, and I enjoy, riding my bike and stuff like that. And mainly, I would say for me, it was definitely like very healthy for my mental health to
Mhm.
quit. So
Yeah,
that's where I saw a big change, was just like my perspective on life and the way I go about doing things changed.
that's amazing, and good for you. That's such an important benefit, and being able to see the difference as well, and be aware of how things changed.
Mhm.
Uh, Trent, what do you think people your age who vape, what do you think stops them from stopping vaping?
Um, yeah, I've had friends that say like, "Oh, I want to quit," and then I mention the program and I say I have, I can get you in for free. I had to pay for it, but I can get you in for free.
Yeah,
It's
because you
completely
get the
free.
bonus.
Exactly. So I was like, you just got to you can just do the program and you'll be good. And sometimes they're like, oh yeah, yeah, just send me the email. I've done it multiple times and no one follows through. So I don't know what's making them not follow through. I don't know if they are scared or they don't believe in themselves, or if they just simply don't want to quit just yet. If it, I think I believe that if you truly like want to stop, then you really have to want to stop. Like, if that makes sense, you can't just be like, oh, like I don't want to be addicted, but I still want to smoke. Like it has to be 100%. So I think that's the issue that people might have my age, is that they just feel like, oh, I'm still young, I'll quit when I'm older.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to have that mentality. I wanted to just nip it in the bud when I could. So that's why I put all my eggs in that one basket and just went for it.
Yeah, that was smart. And maybe I can imagine you said your brother smokes and your mom.
My mom doesn't anymore, but my brother smokes. He smokes like at least a pack a day, probably.
Okay.
And I've mentioned the program to him as well.
Yeah, so you've seen also from people close to you this wanting to quit but not following through or having a difficulty. And I mean that's part of the addiction. It has really nothing to do with the person. It's how
Yeah,
the addiction works. You were really smart
exactly.
to say, I don't want to have to deal with this later. I'm going to deal with it right now, which is so
Yeah.
impressive. So yeah, and overall, what do you think this experience taught you?
Overall,
Mhm.
I'm gonna have to think about that.
Yeah, take your time.
I guess what it taught me is the biggest thing is that the nicotine addiction isn't as strong as you think it is. Is that it is easier than you think. There's this stigma about quitting nicotine, and that stigma is, oh, it's so hard, it's more addictive than heroin. I always hear that, right?
Right?
So, and I just went for it, and it was a lot easier than I expected. I think that, like like I said earlier, how your method just made a lot of sense to me, and how if you're going to use nicotine substitutes, the gum, the patch, it's not going to work long term, because you're still giving your body that nicotine, so you're still getting that source and your body's still dependent on it. But if you kind of wean off of it like you do in the program, you're able to just kind of train your body as you go, and it's not such a drastic jump. You're slightly going down the hill, you're not just jumping off the cliff. So
Great. Thank you for sharing that. Great. And so how did your friends who vape received or perceived or commented on you deciding to stop? Did anyone, try to tempt you to it? Did they believe it? How was it?
yeah, I mean, like I said, that time I was at my friend's house and I was still in the program, but I was pretty
Mhm.
much off. I was like 7 days in or something like that. He was, like I said, he was like trying to get me to vape, and I was like, no man, like I really quit, I'm done. And yeah, it happens, definitely. It's hard when your friend groups smoke and you're around them, and it, you want to smoke with them or whatnot. But like I said, like now that I've gone through the program and I'm not addicted to nicotine anymore, when I hang out with them, they're vaping around me, and I have no issue whatsoever in terms of like, oh, like let me just have one hit, or if I smell it, it might make me reminiscent or want to smoke again. But that doesn't happen. So
So why do you think this doesn't happen? What is the which is great, and that's the goal. I just want to
mhm,
probe more into
yeah.
your thinking, because this can become a great insight and lesson for other people who struggle a lot with the social aspect of smoking or vaping. So what do you think helps you in that moment to not want it, even if you smell it, and be okay if others choose to do it? What are you maybe thinking?
Well, I think just not being addicted to nicotine anymore, like as of today, helps the most. But like as I was quitting, like as I was getting off of it, the biggest thing was just um, I guess just my wanting to quit, my desire to not want to be addicted anymore. And I guess in the moment, if I was struggling, maybe I would do some exercise or try to get my mind off of it. But yeah, I think that's the biggest thing, is just the desire to want to quit.
So you came back to your initial intention and your image of how you imagined yourself, because you never imagined yourself as a smoker, and
Mhm.
the real you was someone who doesn't do this, and you kept coming back to, I don't want to be addicted.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it's wonderful that this has been so powerful for you, and it became your North Star that that helped you. Where do you think this desire comes from? Because it's such a great and strong desire that, some people have a bit of trouble cultivating.
Yeah.
And I know maybe this is um, a difficult question to think on the spot, but if you could.
Yeah, it's a good question, because like I think that's important. I think that like having that rock, that foundation, is what's going to drive you ultimately. So for me, that foundation was just wanting the desire to be healthy and the desire to not be dependent upon a substance. And like you said, my image that I had, where I'd never imagined myself as a smoker. So just kind of sticking to that image of, I don't want to be a smoker for the rest of my life, so I need to do something now. So it was just that was my foundation the whole time, was just my desire to not want to be a smoker anymore.
That's great. Thank you for sharing. And Trent, what advice would you have for someone who wants to quit vaping, but is sort of working on creating that strong desire and commitment to doing so?
I think just imagining a life without vaping, and imagining like the best version of yourself. Like it's you'll never be the best version of yourself, but if you at least strive towards that, then you'll be something pretty dang good, right? So that's kind of what I wanted to do, and I think that's what I would suggest for somebody, is just imagine what you want to be and try to strive towards it. And it's not, I'm not going to say that it's easy, but it's not hard. It's not as hard as you think.
Great. That's great advice. It's not as hard as you think, and strive to be your best self. And of course, this is an endless pursuit, but you can only win by taking that journey of becoming your best self and your best self again and again. So yeah, that's great. Is there anything else that I didn't ask you that you would like to share, or that you would like me to ask you?
Not that I can think of, but I do want to say I wish, I really wish that this program had more recognition, and I wish it was more mainstream, because I truly believe if this program was as big as, the nicotine patches and all that, like people would be quitting left and right, and it would be like, oh, you're trying to quit, here, just do the CBQ method. Why are you wasting your time? Like, it really does work. Like I was very satisfied with the results, and just the whole approach behind it. And like I said, the scientific aspect, it made so much sense. It was so foolproof. You're not born addicted to nicotine, you developed that addiction, your brain was rewired. So to reverse that rewiring and bring it back to its normal self, I really think it's so good what you're doing. And I really appreciate everything that you've done. And I'm so grateful that I found your program.
Well, thank you so much. It means a lot that you're saying this. I want to thank you for trusting the program and for coming here after more than 2 years to share your story and spread the word. And just know that we're working towards making it mainstream. It's definitely the goal for more and more people to have access to it, because it's something good. So thank you.
And I'll keep telling people, like I've told multiple people about it, and I'll keep telling people about it. And if I can just help one person quit, then my job's done. That would be awesome. So
that's amazing. And I want to thank you for being here and for sharing your experience with quitting vaping, because just your message and what you shared, I'm sure will help more than one person quit smoking or vaping. And I hope it's more and more younger people that they
Definitely.
can, take it out of the way now that it's early. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. This
course.
was nice.
Yeah. And if you're here watching this video, leave a comment below and let Trent and I know what you're taking away from his journey that can help you in yours. We're looking forward to reading your comments. Thank you for being here. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.